train going round, down around old Memphis town. There's a ragtime ghost in town who plays the saxophone.
It's a chilly night in Brighton and there's mischief in the air. I'm Rosie and I'm joined by my stalwart companion Bob.
Hello.
On this show we hunt ghosties and ghoulies and long-legged beasties across our favourite stories with only one film to act as our guide each week. For our third case tonight we consider Goblins alongside Jim Henson's Labyrinth. We seem to have misplaced a baby, dear listener. Welcome to the Shadow Trap.
We've got to start with our all-important first question. Rosie, do you believe in goblins?
Right, do I believe in goblins?
Trickiest one yet, I think.
It's a really tricky one.
Yeah.
We first have to address that there's a massive crossover between goblins and all sorts of other small, impish creatures.
Gentlefolk.
Yes, so gnomes, hobgoblins, various kinds of fairies.
Brownies.
Brownies.
Kelpies, although I think they're more sea-based a lot of the time, or river-based at least. Salamanders, you know, kind of those little guys who live out in the wilds or under the hill. There's loads of varieties of them. They do all have little differences which are quite significant and important, and there's myths surrounding all of them separately, and we're going to dig into a few of those while we're loading the Shadow Trap, I suspect.
I suspect so.
But tonight, goblins.
Tonight it's goblins. I'm not sure if I believe in goblins out there in the world. I'm a huge believer in goblin energy.
Right.
I feel like goblins bring us this fantastic kind of low-level malevolence and wickedness. It's not like the cases we've dealt with so far that have been ghosts and werewolves, who are kind of straight up pretty evil. Yeah,
they're bad and they're going to do bad things for you, and you're not going to enjoy their company.
No, absolutely. Whereas goblins, they're kind of fun.
They're just a bunch of guys hanging out, aren't they? They're like they're having a good time. Again, I mean, little people under the hill. I'm going to go with I can believe in that for the same reason that I'm kind of credulous about most of these things, as we'll probably go through and discover. But yeah, I don't really think that if you just happen to bundle across the right cave, you're going to walk into this wonderful wonderland and have a good time with David Bowie and pals. Unfortunately, I don't think we're really there.
But I will say that this week I have a really strong personal connection with goblins.
Right.
Because if you play an awful lot of video games, particularly fantasy RPGs, which are my favourite kind of video game, and indeed tabletop role-playing games, goblins, you do just stumble across goblins when you go into a cave. It happens all the time, and it's always brilliant. It's kind of what I was saying about them being fairly low level. Literally you come across them when you're at a low level in these games. You know, they're a classic tutorial monster.
Right, so that means that they start you early with those, and they're not too difficult, and you get to kind of find your way around the gameplay and stuff by fighting a couple of goblins.
Fighting some goblins, you just kind of stumble across them. They're similar to cave rats in that respect.
That's right, yeah, which is probably what their kind of slightly racist orc brothers would call them.
Right,
Because I was worried about that, about what the difference between an orc and a goblin is, because I guess Lord of the Rings kind of mashes them together a little bit.
A little bit, and I think actually Tolkien did himself. He used the words goblins and orcs at points quite interchangeably.
Right, that's weird, because I have them in my head quite differently. Orcs are martial and aggressive, whereas goblins, again, they can be aggressive, but they're not like, they don't seek trouble in the same way.
I don't think so. No, I think you stumble across goblins and they're doing their own thing, really.
Yeah. But an orc could come for you.
An orc could come for you, and an orc could quite possibly come and invade your country or something like that. It's not really the goblin vibe. You wouldn't want to try and militarise a bunch of goblins to achieve, you know, world domination.
We see what happens when you let goblins form an army later on, and it's delightful.
Great, so our film tonight?
Labyrinth, 1986, directed by Jim Henson, starring, of course, David Bowie and the wonderful Jennifer Connelly, and with people like Frank Oz and Danny John Jules, a favourite of yours.
Yes.
Michael Hordern doing one of the voices, a favourite of mine. It's just a fabulous film.
It's wonderful. So I haven't I only watched Labyrinth for the first time, I think, a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay, right.
It's weird, you know, I think it's a different thing with the way we used to watch media when VHS was the thing, was that you had tapes in your house and those were the tapes you watched.
Yeah.
We had the Dark Crystal, which I've seen something like 80,000 times.
Oh, okay.
And I hadn't watched Labyrinth until very, very recently. What a film.
Yeah, it's wonderful. My experience of it is different to yours. It's been a part of my furniture for pretty much as long as I can remember. And in recent years, it's been, you know, I've used it to like babysit my daughter a lot. So it's been on in the background, I've been cooking dinner or just having a nap and waking up at the end of Labyrinth and she's like, oh, that was good again. And I'm like, yeah, it was. So watching it in preparation for tonight's show was the first time I'd sat down and watched it for a long, long time. And I was joined by my family, which is the first time for the show I've been able to do that. So it was a good choice for that. And it was just great. I couldn't believe how complete and grown up Henson and Terry Jones, who from Monty Python, who did the script, or at least did the first treatment of the script. It went through a lot of rewrites and drafts, but the vision is so complete. It gives itself over to the world that Henson, as a puppeteer, is able to create. And like a lot better than the Dark Crystal, I think. Sorry for it being one of your favourite films.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
It creates a believable space that you are in. Much, much better. I
think that's always the thing with Jim Henson. I think he was so incredibly good at what he did. You know, those the way he uses puppetry, those puppets are every bit as believable as any kind of CGI effect because they're so invested with personality. The voice acting is always really, really good. But just the way that they look, the way that they inhabit space, the way that the actors in the film sort of interact with them. Yeah. They're so full of character. It's such a world of like such impressive character. Yeah, it really. And there's a sense of intelligence or mind behind it as well. Yeah. I really don't mind, I don't object to Henson like really being all over the film and being really in it, because I feel like he's the wizard. And absolutely. And I feel like he's created this really, really special thing that only he, out of anybody in the world, could create, and you're hopeless to be anywhere but right in it. Yeah, completely. It's such a shame. I was reading, I didn't realise this, that Labyrinth wasn't particularly well received, didn't do particularly well in the box office, and Henson was quite sad about that, and it was shortly before he died. It was the last film he made. He died quite early. So he kind of ended on a downer. I would say from the perspective of somebody who can remember it, I'm a bit older than you, and I can remember it coming out at the time. Didn't feel like that. I remember the promo being huge. Oh, great! I remember the excitement in the classroom that yes, we're going to go and see Labyrinth because it's like the Muppets was huge, and like I say, it very quickly just became one of those films which is always there for me. And so, as far as I was concerned, it was always a roaring success. Like, what else could it be? Oh, I'm pleased to hear that. Yeah. So just because like not that many people actually bothered to go and see it at the time, its kind of penetration into culture since then kind of speaks volumes for how great it is, really. It really does. Also, it's a further continuation of my having been entirely broken by watching Twin Peaks Season 3 and making a podcast about it. Yep. Don't forget to check out Diane, listeners. I found it impossible to watch this film and not just think of it as another episode of Twin Peaks again. I'm really sorry that I keep coming back to this. Okay. But it really felt like part of Philip Jeffries' journey, when he just has disappeared, part of his kind of descent into turning into a kettle involved a certain amount of time where he was trapped in this figure of this Goblin King. And he begins, and as soon as I had that in my head, I was incapable of seeing it in any other way. And he's an owl in his other form, yes, and the kind of the fusion that he seeks with Sarah felt to me very similar to the way that Bob wants to kind of become one with Laura. Okay. Which gave the whole thing an extra like, whoa, hadn't thought that before in terms of how sinister and destructive this thing could be, but it resonates beautifully with what we expect the Twin Peaks system of symbology and magic to do as well. That's really nice. I do like the idea that, yeah, David Bowie's character was, you know, David Bowie just existed on multiple planes while he was with us, and part of that was, and in his work indeed as Agent Philip Jeffries, as we've learned. So yeah, part of it was being a Goblin King for a bit. Yeah,
and doing that and being stuck in the same narrative loop as Twin Peaks is stuck in.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about this kind of terrible male thing that wants to become this innocent girl thing, and that's pretty effed up.
Yeah. So the film, I mean, I guess we can quickly summarise the plot. The plot's actually really straightforward, right?
So one of the good things about the film is how it doesn't hang around, how it doesn't try to twist you around with the plot too much. It throws you straight in, and yeah, you go into the labyrinth and you're just there.
Yeah. So young woman Sarah, I guess she's around 15, 16.
Yeah, 15 I think it's
15,
yeah.
Right. She is the kind of bookish, theatrical, dramatic type.
She loves musical theatre.
Oh, I love that.
And it's great that she's not like an annoying version of that.
No.
Like a 15-year-old girl who is just like really into teddies and musical theatre, you'd be a bit like, you're kind of weird and a pain.
Alright,
but she's
slightly hurtful there, Bobsy.
Oh, right. I'm so sorry. But you can imagine like a drama school kid like that,
yeah.
They'd be more up, right? They'd be more kind of in your face, they'd be more effusive and dancey and prancy. And she doesn't, like, she's really got her feet on the ground, actually,
yeah.
For all of her fantastic imaginings. And Sarah is an incredibly relatable, decent-seeming person. I really, like, she's very likeable.
She reminds me a lot of the character Fuchsia in Gormenghast, who's another great favourite of mine.
Right.
Certainly check out Gormenghast if you haven't. But yeah, so Sarah lives with her dad and her stepmother. It's strongly implied, but never gone into, that her mother died. She has a half-brother who is a baby.
Little baby Toby.
Toby.
Yeah.
In a fit of pique at having to babysit Toby, Sarah wishes, following the lines from her book, that, from one of her favourite books, that the goblins would come and take Toby away. And indeed they do.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? So she has been reading about this world. And is she reading about it in preparation for a play? She's kind of, we'll talk about this a bit later, but there's a sense that she's kind of invoking these energies before the film starts.
Yeah.
That she's actually doing this, and this is a big thing for her, kind of, as she's going about her day-to-day life. And so that's why she knows what to do in order to get rid of her little troublesome brother, and how he comes. Because he's not been called out of the blue. This has been worked up to. It's
been worked up to. There's a sense that maybe the goblins have been listening in on Sarah for a little while. The baby gets taken. The Goblin King, played of course by David Bowie, is planning to turn him into a goblin. Sarah goes into the labyrinth to rescue her little brother. Helped along the way by various wonderful puppet friends. She makes some wonderful friends. She has to go through lots of, logic challenges. Yes. She has to, I mean, it's really straightforward and simple, and she basically goes on a spiritual quest. She ascends the levels of selfhood that she needs to achieve in order to get this thing that she needs, which is very important. She made a very foolish bargain at the beginning of the film. She needs to wise up fast, and she does. And it's just nice. It's very nice. All her kind of resourcefulness, her refusal to panic, her moments of weakness are so sort of relatable. They're always softened by the visual delight that you're being given, so you never feel like it's a drag, you never feel like there's too much emotional pain lurking around anywhere. You know you're going to have a good time, and yet the lessons come through very clearly, and you can really see her growing as she walks through the labyrinth. You do, yep. Okay, so on to the research method. This is the stratagem by which we are going to try and trap some goblins. This is how we work the shadow trap. We've made some changes. We've made some slight alterations this week. Yeah. We will go over it. We'll get there, and also, work in progress, guys. We do need to know more questions, and we do need to refine our methodology to make these questions fit for the kind of creatures that we're talking about, because actually one of the things I kind of was thinking as we were doing this was that you can't trap goblins. You sort of shouldn't trap goblins. Maybe
we need to rethink this.
Maybe we need to think of some alternative end goals. Yeah, actually, that's really useful to think about.
Yeah, if you've got any ideas, guys, please let us know.
Absolutely. So, what do we seek? It is goblins. We've been over this briefly. We distinguish goblins from orcs. I would say mainly by the fact that they're very childlike.
Childlike and yeah, young and male, and really they're just like waster teenage boys.
Yes.
They're just like they haven't got any purpose or any direction. They're completely, you know, okay. They're just creatures of appetites, but their appetites, they can't even be bothered to pursue them that much.
Yeah.
You know, they're so lazy, so kind of happy to be doing whatever.
Yeah, I love that about them. They just kind of hang out, don't they?
Yeah.
Just being grumpy and like shitty with each other and stuff. It's brilliant.
And yeah, playing pranks on each other and just looking for a way to laugh cruelly at one another, like you say. I mean, you said like their faces are all huge, right? They're all nose, they're all mouth.
Yeah.
And then I thought, but they're called goblins, right? They're all they're just a big appetite, a big kind of hole on top of a head that's kind of doing nothing. And that's what's so delightful about them, is that our idleness really yearns for them, and that's that kind of that freedom, that freedom to just do nothing is the thing that Sarah's scared of. Like she wants her childhood still, she wants to hold on to it, but she knows that that's not going to work anymore because she's being childish. She's kind of put her brother into a really bad situation.
I see what you mean, yeah.
It's time for her to grow up a bit.
Otherwise she's no better than a little goblin.
Yeah.
But, interestingly enough, when we talk about what we seek, we have something of a caste system within goblinhood. There is always a goblin king. I find this very often in fantasy RPGs.
Right.
You know, there'll be a sort of level of goblins where they're all just kind of goblins. Then you often have a king or a chieftain. Sometimes a shaman. No shaman in this film, unfortunately.
No, well, Bowie provides that role well, doesn't he?
He's both of them, isn't he? He's king and shaman.
He does all the thinking and speaking and seeking for the whole community. It's not like an absolute monarchy by any means, and I kind of have the impression that it's not like he's not a king in the sense that like there was another king before him.
No.
It's just like he's literally the only goblin who's got it together.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, yeah. He's the only one who's, capable of carrying out any kind of plan. He seems to have things going on in other realms of reality. You know, there's no other goblins that we see in this film that are going to bother with any of that. He
could, apart from the sense that the Bowie that he is a glamour that he's wearing, because we know that he's also an owl. You kind of get the impression that he's maybe not even a goblin. Like he's he's just come in and he. What I find quite touching is that either these goblins are just aspects of his being that are kind of given heads and are allowed to walk around, or he just kind of stumbled upon them and just decided to care for them because he does care about them in a way, doesn't he?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's certainly a kind of Lost Boys vibe to the goblins, right?
Yeah.
And Bowie could just that character could just sort of step in. I think there are huge crossovers in general between goblins and fairies, and Bowie's character to me reads as a kind of high-level fairy more than a goblin.
His direct, his clearest inspiration is surely Oberon from Midsummer Night's Dream.
Absolutely.
Oberon's like brilliant. He's like, he's as cool as David Bowie. He's omnipotent pretty much. He's an absolute dick. He just likes bickering with his wife. And David Bowie, I mean Jareth, the Goblin King, to give him his proper name.
Yeah.
Is looking for that wife to bicker with.
Yeah, and you look at that kind of enchanted ball that Sarah... You know, this is pure fairy.
Yeah.
The idea of losing your memory, an enchanted ball that you can't leave, you just dance and dance and dance. This is all very much fairy. I was trying to think of a good fairy text that we could do at some point. I can't really think of one.
I can't really think of one either. I think we should again defer to our listeners, and if anybody's got an idea for a fairy text that resonates with them really well, please let us know and we'll try and pick it up for you. We'll try and stick it in a trap.
That would be wonderful.
The film does give us... it doesn't ever really go, okay, this is a goblin, this is what it is, but it does give us, through the other creatures that live in Goblin Land, who don't appear to be the thralls, although they do have to kind of obey the Goblin King. We do see our friend Hoggle, who's a dwarf. And interestingly, the first thing that we see Hoggle doing is hunting fairies. And so we know that the goblins aren't fairies, and we know actually that although they look kind of like fairies in the kind of a dainty little way, they're like spiteful little pests in this world. I think this is a wonderful piece of pro-goblin, anti-fairy propaganda, insofar as this kind of, you know, the grandeur and kind of like refinement of fairy culture is something which gets quite a kicking in this.
It does.
And I like that. And I think, and from my memory, this is one of the first texts where I think it's quite normal to have fairies being a bit sinister.
Certainly, yeah. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is a kind of
it goes into that quite a lot. And I feel that before Labyrinth, we did just think of fairies as being like friendly little beautiful things that
like
we found.
Tinkerbell.
Yeah, you know, friendly. Even though she's quite spiteful, but she's still, you know, she has a reason.
Sort of dainty and pretty.
Yeah.
I think the idea of fairies as something more malevolent.
Yeah, kind of started here, or not started, but was resurrected here.
Was resurrected here.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And obviously there was a relationship between fairies and elves, and again, maybe David Bowie's character Jareth tracks more with an elf in some ways as well. I have a unified theory.
Let's have it.
Of goblins, which is, I was thinking, okay, so what's the relationship with goblins and orcs? Goblins are to orcs as fairies are to elves. So goblins are like a lower level, lower energy version, and we know that there's actually relationships between orcs and elves and goblins and fairies as well. That's my unified theory of goblins, orcs, elves, and fairies.
I like that a lot, should we say. I think that works really well.
Yeah, well, we'll see if it continues to hold up, maybe,
what we
as
need
we get onto the other creatures.
Yeah, as we go through the other creatures, we will look for this, and it's interesting to find that there may be echoes of each other kind of as we go up the level, as we climb up the ladder and get a bit more ambitious about the kind of things we're hunting.
That's exactly it, I think, and yeah, like an orc represents a more ambitious goblin. And an elf is a more ambitious fairy.
Okay, yeah, this is kind of the thing, right? Is that one of the things I was talking about, the kind of clarity and simplicity of the Labyrinth story, and one of the things, and this is really in marked contrast to the Innocents, where in Shadow Track 1 we talked about the real pivot of the psychological reading or the supernatural reading.
Yes.
One of the things I really love about Labyrinth is that it's actually incredibly clear that it's a psychological thing. Yeah. You know, all of the creatures that she meets are just her own toys given form, more or less. Yeah,
you see pretty much all the settings, all the creatures in her bedroom. If you look for them, they're all like, as you say, toys or posters. Or,
Like we're very clearly going into Sarah's personal being for that, the whole thing. There's no ambiguity about it. There's no randomness to it. There's no, you know, she's not swept away by a tornado. She doesn't happen to fall down a hole. She also is given an agency that we never see this young girl character have in classical fairy tales, because she invites the Goblin King to come and do the thing in the first place, and then, spoiler alert, she realises by the end that this is all just a load of nonsense, and she can win just by using her words and her will again.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good, is that there isn't any kind of, or it gives us the freedom to interpret all of these things that she does meet, especially the goblins, as levels of her psychology or of her personality or of her spiritual being, and that's handy.
It's a sense of play, isn't it? It's like being transported to the inner world in a way that is quite sort of light and has great kind of energy, and you know, it's lovely. And
the play is a discovery, right? It's all about her self-discovery, and she does it by having a wonderful jaunt through this exciting adventureland.
I like that. I really like that. So we kind of touched upon it. I mean, where should we go? We need to traverse inner space, as is often the case.
Yeah. Really, the goblins we met were the friends on the inside.
That we made
or something like that.
Indeed. But also we certainly do need to go underground. I love that about goblins. I love that they just hang out in these kind of dank caves. It's not so much in Labyrinth. There are a lot of underground spaces. Actually, for a film about a labyrinth, it's fairly out in the open air. Yeah, you get the sense that there's maybe a high off roof, but also you do get weather. Yes. Yeah, you get kind of light, and you get space.
the caviness comes out in the things and the people, doesn't it? It's like the walls have been pulled out and turned into rude shape, and that's why the goblins have this pallor to them. That's why they have this kind of muckiness, just because they're not far off the earth themselves.
Yes, no, I think that's true. I think there is just like, yes, this incredible earthiness. I think it also, as you say, it comes out in the look of them, the feel of these puppets, which are such, again, Jim Henson's work is so beautifully embodied and feels so very present. Yeah, they do feel like things of mud, of the earth.
Yeah, they're a bit like like an early form of nature trying to happen, and it was a bit like, that didn't quite work, let's try again, and then you get dwarves, or that didn't quite work, let's try again, and eventually you keep going and you get humans.
Isn't that interesting? Because often that's the idea with, I believe in, I could be wrong here, I think this is the case with a lot of belief in trolls in sort of Scandinavian countries, is that they are kind of very closely related to rocks, basically.
Right, yeah. And obviously rocks and rocks as living animated beings are a really important part of our Labyrinth as we go on, and they're kind of how they win.
Yeah,
because of the alliance they've been able to make with the rocks.
So they come out of the soil. Certainly in a lot of games they live underground. That's when you come across them, you kind of dig through into some old ruin or something underground, and there's the goblins.
I really want to talk about the bit at the very beginning of the film.
Okay.
We open pretty much with Sarah in this kind of like wonderful kind of like old dress, rehearsing her lines from this play that she's maybe it's like a school play that she's learning to do, or part of the local dramatic society, whatever, but maybe it's just what Sarah likes to do in her spare time.
I think it might be.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? I think it might be. And she's just in this wonderful garden, and we don't see much of it, but it's very green, and there's some nice kind of ornate, classical sculpture in the background. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's England, she's in England.
That's so funny that you just kind of identified it as being English garden. It just had that feel to it.
Yeah, I immediately just thought, oh, I've been places like that. Okay. Right. And then she kind of walks out of frame, and she's immediately just in an American town.
Yeah.
It's American, Rose American, but it's obviously just America. And I'm like, oh, that's really weird. Okay. America's a big place. There's plenty of places that look exactly like England. I'm sure that's what it is. There's a big chunk of it that they called New England because they got there and thought, oh, it looks a bit like England.
It's quite a lot like England.
Yeah. So I figured it was probably just that. But then I kind of went a bit further and I looked into it, right? And okay, so the garden that was shot in, like the whole thing was shot in Pinewood Studios in London because you need that kind of constructed sound set, and the Henson company had a long history of working in the UK as well. That's where they got their first break and all that kind of thing. It was shot not in a place that's particularly close to Pinewood, so it's a bit like, why did they go there? But anyway, West Wickham Park was where it was shot, in Buckinghamshire. Now, it was built in like the 1740s, and that places it contemporary perfectly with Sheffield Park Gardens, where we saw the Innocents and where we met our ghosts in Shadow Trap episode 1.
Right.
Beyond that, West Wickham is famous because it was the home of Sir Francis Dashwood, the famous libertine and kind of head of the very infamous Hellfire Club.
Such cool guys.
Such cool guys. I mean, awful guys.
Awful guys.
I mean, if you want
cool.
But cool. Yeah, absolutely. It's like we're not looking to them for ethical guidance.
No.
But we are keen to have a party with them.
Yes.
Because we think they know how to do that really well.
Yeah.
Now, what's really cool about that is that obviously there's this, he was a mason and a ceremonial magician who just kind of liked to be like, oh no, we'll definitely do some shagging at the end of it, right? And it was like, yeah, and we're all going to be drunk. Yeah, definitely. But he was so rich and so crazy that he had a chalk hill on West Wickham Park, dug out and excavated and turned into this wonderful complex of caves, which are now a tourist attraction known as the Hellfire Caves. And he's literally, even though you don't see them in this tiny shot that we have of Sarah standing in this garden, she's standing in a garden where there's an actual labyrinth.
That's so cool. I had no idea.
And
that's so weird that they took the time to do that.
I know, right? And it's really, that's what I was saying about Jim Henson having this kind of clarity of vision. I'm really like, oh, I think he may have been thinking about this on levels which were very private to him, very clear, very kind of in sync with what we know about the film and about what it's trying to tell us. And that kind of evocation of space at the very beginning, there's a bit of genuine magic there. That's really nice.
Third question.
I'll do this one.
Sorry.
Okay, third question. Where do they come from? Again, we've covered this a little bit, but where do they come from?
Okay, this is somewhere where I have quite a clear idea, I think. Goblins are clearly very closely related to the idea of changelings. Yeah. Which is a kind of European folk belief that some babies are taken away by fairies and a kind of fairy is left in its place. Often the idea was that it was a kind of old fairy that kind of just wanted to live out its days being pampered. So we go and like
go and be a baby.
Go and be a baby for a bit, be a human baby. But there's something in this that I think is quite sad, really, at the core of the goblin mythology, which is this idea of changelings, because we do know that changelings was often used as an explanation for babies that had various developmental disabilities or abnormalities, babies that were failing to thrive, babies that died suddenly. The idea that it had been swapped out by fairies kind of provides some kind of explanatory framework for it. And I think it actually even goes beyond that explanatory framework. I think it provides a kind of emotional framework within which you can work in periods of time when a lot of babies died.
Yes, yes, of course.
Where this happened, you know, a lot, and was something that women and men indeed were having to deal with a lot of child death. Having some kind of framework that says, okay, you know, this child may just be visiting us for a short time, and it maybe will go back at some point. Yeah. It just makes it easier to cope with. It makes me think of, there's a really famous study in anthropology by a woman named Nancy Shepherd Hughes. It was a book she wrote in, I think it came out in 1991, maybe, Death Without Weeping. Right. She did field work with women in Brazil living in shanty towns. And she found that in cases where, so these women are living under terrible, terrible, crushing poverty, terrible economic exploitation. Your average woman is starting to have children around Sarah's age, and the infant mortality rate is somewhere like 40%. Those are children who, you know, who are live births, but actually stillbirths and miscarriages are also incredibly high. So what Shepherd Hughes found was that a lot of the time, where a baby is obviously failing to thrive, an explanatory framework kicks in quite early, where they are considered to be angels who are visiting for a short time, and at some point they're going to be recalled by their guardian saint, and they're going to go back. What it does is it means that life isn't kind of endless grieving, because you have to be able to move on. You have other children who are there. You know, you cannot. Something that Shepherd Hughes said that was really sad was that part of the skill of being a mother in these conditions is learning when it's safe to love your child and when it's not. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And you can see the way in which the changeling mythology may fulfill a similar kind of purpose. Yeah, like they were never really here, or they weren't really what we thought they were going to be. And I mean, I don't know, does this connect to like beliefs of like dying unbaptized and stuff like that? Yeah, quite possibly. It's like, rather than saying that your baby's going to go to hell, it's a bit like, no, it's not. It's not a human, it's a goblin. It goes and lives underground, and they sit around sing songs all day. Well, it absolutely does connect up to that in the areas of Brazil where she was talking about, not with goblins, obviously, but the idea that they're angels, you know, and that the because the Catholic Church in that area were not trying to stop pregnancies happening in any way at all. Right, sure, yeah, not taking the other view on how we could sort this problem out. No, so the explanation that, you know, well, they're going to go straight to a good place is quite helpful. So it's a way of dealing with or mediating mothers' love for their children, and it's really interesting that in Labyrinth the idea that it is almost working the other way, that because Sarah doesn't love Toby, she may lose him.
Yeah, absolutely, and her kind of lack of concern, or not even her lack of concern. It's more positive than that, isn't it? From her, it's more active than that from her perspective. She actually wants to get rid of this kid because he's a pain in the arse.
Yeah.
And that opens the door to his goblinhood, and the goblins are kind of. This is how they reproduce, isn't it? This is where you get new goblins. You find a baby, you take it away with you. You know, the way that they, when we see them in their brilliant song sequence when they're playing with Toby underground, they're clearly like welcoming him into the gang.
Absolutely, yeah. Here's a new one.
Yeah. This is what you've got to look forward to, mate. You know, you're going to go brown on the stroke of 13 o'clock or whatever it is.
You could grow huge hairy ears.
Yeah. And they're kind of, and it really ties into their, the kind of the cruelty of their humour. Is that like they laugh so much because really they know that they all want to spend their days crying because they've been torn away from their mothers.
Yeah.
And Jareth, in the way that he's the only one who's able to kind of take these emotions and articulate them and put them into like a human form. Is kind of keenly aware of that, and he as much as his kind of kingly duties to the goblin realm mean that he has to kidnap new children and they're going to become his friends. He knows that he's doing a bad thing to this kid, and he's kind of sorry for it.
Yes. Yeah. Let's put the light back on. Honestly, that terrible light. It turns itself on because it's on a kind of alarm. It's like an alarm clock light.
I see.
Yeah, but I think...
That was weird, I didn't notice what it was, I just knew that there was
something had
nothing
changed.
there. Yeah.
There we go. It's back on now.
And Goblinland, where they do come from, it's kind of, as we say, it's so messy and ramshackle. It is like what happens to a place if you just let a bunch of stupid kids run it.
Yeah.
It's like...
Oh yeah, there's a real kind of Lord of the Flies vibe to it. I really like that. I like how ramshackle it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Everything's just patched together from other things.
And the only thing, like, there's no sign of them ever getting it together to even cook a meal. There's no kitchen utensils around. The only thing they've been able to get themselves together enough to do is to create a really rubbish army and a stupid gun. It's just like, it's exactly what a bunch of boys would do if you said, yeah, just go on, just do it.
Yeah, you're just running your own society now, lads.
Yeah, and the kind of the other thing that's great is the tunnel cleaner, which is the other sign that they may. It's like, oh, this is a complex thing. This is something that you've done. This is a sign of civilization that you guys have got. I didn't really think you had it in you. And then it seems all scary and challenging, and then they just kind of duck out of the way. And there's just two stupid old goblins like pedaling a dumb bike because they couldn't work out a way to not have this being done with a stupid bike.
I love that. I love how low tech all their solutions are. Yeah. And like there's this like cargo cult vibe to like all of their creations. Like from the outside they look like, oh, maybe they made a robot. And then you look behind it, it's like, no, again, it's just a little goblin pulling levers.
Yeah, it's really stupid, and he's terrible at it. Question 4. What do they want?
Well, we've kind of touched on it, haven't we? Babies.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, that is their means of reproduction. Like, that's the only way they can do things and create things, as we've just like been talking about, is by scavenging.
Yeah, and it kind of, it puts them at great odds with the cosmic order, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It really is like, oh, okay, yeah, you don't sexually reproduce, you don't magically reproduce. You know, I said it feels like they emerge from the earth, but they don't. They're thieved babies, really.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an abomination. It's a bit like, you shouldn't be here, guys. Like, you do need to be either shut away or reckoned with or put in a shadow trap. One way or another, you guys shouldn't be left in charge, or you shouldn't be left to what you can do because you're not even making yourselves happy.
Yeah. They're just kind of sitting around. They seem to enjoy play. Yeah,
play, singing songs, you know, it's great. They're like, they're like kind of guys in a band as well. They like singing songs. Like, the only one of them who, as we say, has got it together enough to think about what he's going to wear has decided to deck himself out like an absurd, like, 80s poodle rocker. You know, and they're trying to create this. This world does have this glamour and it does have this appeal. You know,
yeah.
like to sit around all day and do nothing. That is awesome. Yeah, that's great. it does feel like you know, the sweaty reality of backstage at a good gig, where you've just got, you know, hairy spotty men kind of like going about doing their thing, and there's this kind of great pretense of fantasy and glamour happening out the front, but then you go back to the tour bus and it's all a bit grotty and you're eating a crap pasty and and actually, guys, yeah, we're not too into this.
But I do like the as I say, the kind of gentle antagonism of the vibe that they've got there. You know, they don't seem to want anything. Obviously, taking babies is hugely malevolent, but the way they do it seems to be fairly. You know, they don't mean to be mean particularly.
No, they don't. They don't. They're welcoming you into the gang. Like, it's just like, come on, yeah, it's great. You sit around and do nothing all day. And you're like, guys, I'm envious and disappointed at the same time.
They don't seem to have any big plans beyond that, apart from perhaps, as we said, Jareth seems to have something more of the ambition around him.
Well, this is where the question kind of is maybe needs a bit of a tweak, because what they want is kind of nothing. Nothing. They're not fussed. But what they need, what they lack, is really, really clear. They lack any kind of purpose or direction, and the kind of purpose and direction that their society would require. Sorry to use such a kind of a gendered term, but they need a woman's touch. Like, there's no girls around, guys, and it's making you all stupid. And this is all part of why Jareth has got this kind of real thing for Sarah. He's like, I need a queen. This doesn't work.
Do you think that if he managed to get Sarah as like the Goblin Queen, my God, they could do all sorts of things, couldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe that's what he's thinking. Like that'll shape them up.
Yeah, and he also knows that the thing that Sarah needs is to achieve a kind of a reckoning with male forces.
Yeah.
You know, the male force that he keeps in his tights, that kind of thing.
Barely keeps in his tights.
Yeah. Mr. Bowie dresses to the right, as we discover. But do you know what I mean? It's like he needs a woman to complete him. Or not, sorry for being so binary and so kind of worried about lack as a kind of a motivator. But she needs to achieve a reckoning with the maleness inside her. He needs to achieve a reckoning with this kind of enormous female void that is making him so bored of his like stupid mates.
Yeah.
You know, they're both really ready to outgrow this situation and get onto the place where they need to be.
I think that's true. Question 5. What kind of disguise should we wear? I don't know if I have anything for that. Do you?
I could do.
You do? Okay. Question 5. What kind of disguise should we wear as we go about setting this trap?
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Normally when we put on our disguise to set the shadow trap, we want to blend in, we want to make sure that we don't like disturb the scenery too much in order for the thing to be scared off. You know, we want to kind of create, through our appearance, a kind of a welcoming presence. And what's interesting here is that I think that I don't think you're ever going to see a goblin unless you're wearing a disguise. I think you have to be into the process of going goblinwood before there's ever any kind of chance of you finding them. Like we say, Sarah is perhaps, you know, she's been living with Jareth in her head for quite a long time before the start of the film. She deliberately invokes his presence and then invites him to come and do the thing that she wants him to do. But it's great, right, because she doesn't make the wish and then they appear. She starts to make the wish, and then all of a sudden they start to creep up behind her. They suddenly become much more apparent, and that's a wonderful scene. Like the mixture of mischief and malevolence there is where it's best realised in the film, because there are these wonderful fleeting shots of things in the background that just look hairy and kind of you can't quite see.
It's really cool, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think he would have got near that goblin energy without that prep work, without that deliberate invocation, and without that will from Sarah, right? It is all about her and her decision to positively call on this bad thing to happen, and realising that then, oh my goodness, I've done a terrible thing. I'm gonna have to change in order for this thing to be rectified. I don't think you can get close to being. I don't think you can get close to Goblin unless you're disguising yourself as some kind of, you know, Goblin, Queen, Wizard, Witch, Suitor.
Right, as someone who is set up to encounter them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really interesting because we don't, as we were saying, goblins are a creature that is difficult to say you really believe in any way, because the only place you encounter them is in video games or role-playing games or fantasy books and stories, you're already entering into that world when they come. It's not like a ghost.
No, absolutely.
Where you might just be trying to go about your evening and suddenly, you know.
Or it's not like an abduction scenario, right? It's not like somebody walks into the woods or goes to the magic fairy ring, disappears for 2 days, comes back later and it's changed. It's like, it's not as random or as kind of as unfortunate as that. It's a bit more like, the goblins are here. I mean, you know, okay, they present such a kind of a basic, fundamental stratum of creation that unless you've got your feet on them, unless you're connected to it somehow, then you're lost. You are going to be in trouble. You do have to make a reckoning with your goblinhood, and I think most of us do it unconsciously just through the process of growing up. But Sarah's really kind of put on the spot now. Sarah's like fucked up. Sorry, Sarah's like messed up pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's a kids' film. Sarah's messed up pretty bad by doing this, and once she's done it, the process really does have to be gone through. There's no coming back from it, and she's adopted that disguise. It was a risky thing to do. You're going to have to follow it through and close the rest of the track now.
Okay, so this is one of the questions that we have refined. Coming up next is our question 6. Previously we had it as, how do we know that they're there? Or signs of presence to look out for. I've crossed that out and I've written, how do they appear to us?
Yeah, I mean, the how is quite interesting. Again, it's like it's through invitation and invocation, but kind of more in terms of what I think we mean. They're horrible little brown urchins.
Or green. I mean,
or green, yeah,
really
yeah.
often green.
Yeah, I know that's true. Yeah, they're just earth tones.
Yes,
yeah.
very, very much earth. Sometimes grey.
Yeah,
like,
right, yeah,
sort of mottled. Yeah, their sort of physical characteristics. We've touched on this as well. Is big ears, big noses, big mouths.
But where they kind of get more interesting in the context of the movie is, of course, where they don't look like that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so, and it's Mr. Bowie. It's like he presents this kind of glamour that's obviously the energy of the Goblin Land can be put to some use if you can, and you can use it to create quite impressive things. You can turn yourself into David Bowie, for goodness sake. That's not bad. And his kind of strand of like romantic herohood and the way that he's so angsty, his final lines to Sarah are something like, all I ask is that you fear me, love me, and I will be your slave. And it's like Jareth, you're really messed up, mate.
Yeah. You're being like super intense right now.
Yeah. You're gonna have a whole trilogy of sequels to cite your problems. We managed to do it with Sarah's in a brisk 80 minutes, but mate, you've really got some work to do here. But also he's fantastic.
Yeah.
He's absolutely great, and he has managed to take this muddiness and this bunch of idiots, and his aspiration to setting himself apart from that is like, I can be a rock star. I can be anything. I can have the best parties that anyone's ever seen, and that kind of is the purposeless desire of the goblin in its kind of rude form. Kind of turns into this kind of sophisticated grown-up form, which is again completely vapid, completely just kind of empty.
Yeah.
And
it's still not going anywhere, still completely directionless.
Yes, but can be full of artifice and full of wonder and full of kind of dainty self, gratification.
Absolutely. So yeah, once again, moving up and down the levels with the goblins as we become more ambitious, but we never ever develop anything that seems to be a route forward, a way out, a place of actual growth. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But he really feels that, like his ennui and his kind of like existential angst is so over the top. Obviously, if he had managed to do whatever it is that he has planned for Sarah, then I still don't think that would have worked. Like I say, I think Oberon and Titania do spend existence bickering and not really getting on and like having affairs and stuff. It's like it's not a happy union. But at least he's aware that there's that lack there. At least he seems to be concerned about the pointlessness of goblin existence.
And it's very pointless, isn't it? I mean, I think one of the ways we'd know if a goblin was around is just the mess. Like, everywhere they go, like the places they occupy, we've kind of said this, but yeah, scavenge together, bits and pieces cobbled. I love the fact, and this is throughout all the places where you see goblins, they are always wearing this kind of ramshackle armour that they've just kind of pillaged from dead soldiers. They weren't in the war. They weren't doing anything important. That was the orcs. But they came in afterwards and nicked everyone's armour.
All off all the dead bodies. In fact, that's probably that's quite a good little like folk origin for what a goblin is, isn't it? It's not too far off from a ghoul. They're kind of they're preoccupied with dead spaces. It's like we put our dead bodies under the ground, and they're like, oh, cool, thanks. Yeah, we'll have that. There's also like, sorry. When we get to the excellent song section, which is probably the best scene in the whole film, the Dance Magic Dance, the famous song, they use slugs and snails and puppy dog tails as their thing. They're horrible little boys.
Yeah, that's completely what they are.
That's totally what they are.
Yeah, just sort of playing soldiers and fighting and kind of scavenging. I find it really interesting that they seem to be completely incapable of any form of kind of economic activity. Like, you know, Jareth is the king of a completely useless kingdom that's never going to produce for him. You know, it's interesting that seems to be enough for him, but as we've said,
because you'd kind of expect them to be greedier than they are. You'd expect them to be more gluttonous. You'd expect them to be more concerned with getting theirs, but they don't even seem to be that fussed about that.
No, I mean, I think the thing with goblins that I really like is this just kind of relentless hostility. You just imagine they're just constantly fighting with each other, and they just cannot reach the very basic level of cooperation that is required for any sort of economic activity to take place whatsoever. They can't produce anything, they can't store anything, all they can do is scavenge.
There's also like, so when we think about what the labyrinth is like as a classical metaphor might mean, it's obviously, and the thread that one reels out behind oneself in order to navigate it. It's everything, right? It's your entire lifeline. So really, when we talk about the labyrinth, we're talking about it as a place where everything is there already.
Right.
So they're kind of, their lack of production, you know, because like you look at them and you go, oh well, there's a really good class-based analysis here, right?
Right.
They're like they're a perfect kind of fit for the lumpen proletariat or something, and you're like, oh no, they're not. They're much more useless.
They're so useless. Yeah, they'd be an absolutely terrible like labour force. Like you wouldn't want them as a labour force. No, they don't. They just nick all your stuff and fight with you. Yeah,
they don't appear to have class interest at all, and that is because they know that everything's there. They're like, if I do want food, I'll just pick it up.
Yeah.
If there is armour, I just nick it off a dead body.
But I love that about them because I think they're probably really difficult to exploit. Like, get on the goblins.
Absolutely, don't get me wrong. Like they take nothing from nobody, and nobody bothers them, and they're left well enough alone. And their king is like, lads, just whatever. Just whatever.
Like he tries to send them out to, like, you know, protect when Sarah and the good guys squad are kind of rounding on them. He's like, okay, you go out and deal with it, and it's like they're rubbish.
They really can't be bothered.
They get turned around, they have a little go, but you know, all their armour falls off and they're constantly falling on their bums.
Yeah, and it's really noticeable that when Jareth does want anything done, he goes to Hoggle. He goes to the dwarf, who is industrious and you know, and nice, as we find out, even though he's kind of pretending that he isn't. Yeah, there's like, if you like, and that's also what's quite interesting, is that although this is kind of goblin land, there are other, not forces at work necessarily, but there are other things that don't fit the goblin template and represent a different kind of perspective on life. And obviously that's incredibly important for Sarah's journey of discovery, that she has these kind of other things to talk to and think of and to kind of use to reflect upon herself. But they do kind of show up goblinness as not like a default for this realm. It's a bit like these guys. It's kind of, all of this stuff is theirs. All of this ruin is theirs. They're not going anywhere. We have to deal with them. But frankly,
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
like, they're not a huge threat.
Yeah, no, stay out their way and they won't annoy you.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I've crossed out another one here. Question number 7 was how to draw them in. I've just simplified it. What bait should we use?
Babies.
Babies.
Yeah.
Babies is the obvious bait for reasons we have gone over. They have no other means of reproduction. If they want to keep going, for some reason they seem interested to do, they're going to need some more babies.
But as we've also said, you have to invite them in, apparently, according to this version of them as well. Like, you have to make that wish and you have to kind of have that intent, because they're so, like, they're not active enough to come and get you.
They're not going to bother.
No, they're not even going to know you're there.
Yeah.
You have to kind of be like, yeah, take my brother. Like, please.
And also, I mean, it's kind of a side note, but I was interested to think about what they eat, and rats is what they eat, definitely. Rats on sticks.
Rats on sticks?
That's what goblins eat. All day. Rats on sticks and fish heads.
Yeah. I mean, on a good day, they might eat poo, Rosie.
I bet they do, though. I really like that. I just like the idea of some goblins being like, that's a really nice bit of poo over there.
That's good. I think that's a fresh one from that dog. Yeah. Oh, the dog, man.
Oh, the dog is gorgeous.
Yeah.
That lovely Dulux dog.
Yeah. I love the bits where they replace him with a puppet when he's scared and he just starts shaking and that's all he's doing. That's fantastic. And my actual favourite bits of any of the bits in the film are just like when you have a long shot of him with the guy on his back.
Yes.
And it's just like, yeah, that's just a dog with a teddy bear on its back. And it's like bouncing around the place and everyone's having so much fun. It's just adorable. It's
so wonderful to see. It's such a wonderful film. Like, I love seeing that you know, that's the way that they do effects. You know, it's so embodied and just... There is never going to be a better depiction of a small dog riding a big dog
yeah.
on screen. You can throw Weta Workshop, you can give them billions and billions of pounds. You will never get anything better than that.
No, I mean, like, you could, like, someone on the internet one day will be like, well, do you know what? I've stuck a dog on my dog. and I'm going to give you the best 15 seconds of your life right here. But until then, we've got Labyrinth, and that's plenty good.
It's plenty.
But really, we have to kind of bait the trap with Sarah's need, like, and her will, right? So, like, she has to invite him in, and she makes that wish, and then later on she kind of also declares, okay, the wish is over, I'm not playing this game anymore, I win. But really, kind of, I was noticing how Jareth was completely lost from the beginning. Like, the very process of him taking the baby and the challenge of navigating the labyrinth that Sarah has to go through, there was no other way that this was ever going to end up except that by the time she got there, Sarah was going to be able to know what to do.
Yeah.
So, and that gives a real sort of air of tragedy to him, is that he knows that he's got the baby, he's got his ideal woman kind of coming to find him, and he knows that when she gets there, she's going to be transformed and she's going to be able to deal with him.
Oh my goodness, I really like that. Yeah.
I just kind of really felt that, like, everything in the labyrinth is so perfectly set up to teach her the lesson that she needs to learn. That from the moment it happened, there was no other way that this could go, and he was always just like, you're not getting my brother.
Yeah.
I'm going to come and beat you on this.
It's wonderful, isn't it? And actually the kind of air of romantic dissolution about him, it works beautifully, doesn't it? It's this sense we have of the romantic hero as someone who's just kind of stuck in his own extravagance and decadence and squalor, but is, as you say, a tremendous sense of ennui, tremendous boredom, and can elevate the female muse, but maybe can't ever elevate himself.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He, like, the party that he puts on for her and stuff, you really feel like he's like, it's going to be great, we're going to have parties, right? And she's a bit like, I like a nice party,
yeah,
but guy, I'm not stupid anymore. There's going to have to be more than parties in order to kind of get there. But there's also, but the other thing I love about that is that it's also like, do you know what, Sarah? Growing up isn't that bad. You get to have parties.
You do get to have parties.
Like, they're better than the ones you have when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Like staying up all night dancing, which Jareth will do with you. That's a good time there. There's nothing there's nothing that you need to hold on to here too much. But also, don't dismiss it too easily out of hand.
Yeah.
Question 8. What do we need to be wary of?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? We don't really need to be too wary, because, like you were saying, Bob, like, in order to encounter the goblin, we kind of have to be already on a quest.
Yes.
That will bring us into contact with the goblins. And the goblins are never going to trouble us too much. We're always going to be able to transcend them.
It's like you were saying about them being like a kind of a entry-level initiatory kind of presence.
They are a tutorial monster. That is what they are there for. They are there to help us get better.
Yeah.
And they will always do that, you know. So, so yeah, wariness. I think we should embrace the goblin. I think we should rush towards the goblin.
I think once you you can rush them and embrace them, but like if you're there for too long,
yeah,
just don't listen to them too much.
Yeah, okay.
Don't give in to their nonsense. Like have a good time, but you're gonna have to leave as well.
So there's that bit where she eats the peach.
Which is a big no-no, guys. If you're ever in Fairyland, you don't eat the food. Everyone knows that.
Never eat fruit given to you by a fairy, ever. And yeah, so there's a threat of forgetting and a threat of just kind of falling and wallowing in the sort of bullshit that is Jareth's world. That's actually when she goes into the ball, doesn't she? And there's a sense, kind of at first glance, that it's a tremendously glamorous time, but, you know, everyone's got these weird dog head masks on, and it actually doesn't look that good, and Jareth has been very serious and strange.
Yeah, yeah, he comes off as really creepy, and all of his mates suddenly seem like a really bunch of snobby, like, scene kids or something, and you're like, oh, okay. Actually, if you had it together, you'd really fancy yourselves, wouldn't you? And that's not that appealing.
But the goblins themselves, I mean, the little guys, you know, the little green guys.
Little green guys, bless them.
I think they're all right. I don't know. I love that about them, though. I love that, like, in when you are playing a video game and you do come across a goblin, you know it's just not a problem. Like,
right.
Oh, it's goblin. This is just fun. This is just me learning how to do the combat. This is great.
Oh, just cut his leg off. Yeah.
Yay! It's brilliant. And you know, goblins would enjoy that in turn themselves. You know, they just enjoy all this stuff.
I guess the only sense in which they're a little bit of a threat in the film, and I guess this kind of works with a gaming context as well, is like if they mob you.
Yes.
You know,
yeah. You wouldn't want them necessarily to mob you at all. No.
Because that's the danger, isn't it? Is you're like, this is fine. We're having a great time. I'm not too worried about the threat that you guys present, and then all of a sudden, you can't get out. There's too many of them.
And that's really interesting, actually, isn't it? Because I guess once the goblins are mobbing you, you realise that these are all little babies that got lost. And maybe that in itself becomes very overwhelming and terrifying. Like if Sarah had to, at any point, face the idea that this army that was coming at her was just a load of little Tobys whose sisters didn't love him.
Yeah.
That would be tough.
And you know, like we were saying, the trip to Goblin Land involves kind of climbing up through the levels of your own psyche. You will have that understanding. Like you won't be able to avoid that question for very long. Yeah.
Oh no, actually, that could be quite overwhelming. We should certainly be wary of such revelations.
Well, yeah, I think this is the thing, isn't it? It's like kind of as a physical threat, they're fine. They're fine. We can have a good time with these guys.
Absolutely deal with the goblin.
But what they kind of imply and what they suggest about what we've got inside us, you do need to not be there for too long. You can't dwell on it. You don't need to be there for too long. Otherwise, you are just an annoying teenager smoking too much dope in your room, and everyone's going to hate you.
Hurtful again, Bobsy. All right, last question. How to close the cage?
It's like, it's God let me grow up, but not yet.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? Like she realises that she doesn't need to be stuck in this world where she's engaging with Jareth and all of his nonsense. You know, she doesn't believe in him. Yeah. Again, more evidence he might be a fairy, because we know what happens to fairies when you say you don't believe in fairies, they die. Yeah. Is it saving the baby? I'm not sure. I think maybe Toby would have been fine as a goblin. He probably would have enjoyed himself.
Yeah, it would have been alright.
It would have been, yeah.
It's not, like, you don't get a great biography out of a goblin, except for Jareth, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you're not going to have a particularly remarkable life, but also you're not going to cause too much harm, and that's really important.
You're going to be with your mates.
Going to be with your mates. You are going to have a life which has got a kind of a double-edged, admittedly, pleasure to it. You know, you can do it. I think the thing about, like, so Sarah has to transcend her childish nature and her innocence. But what's really brilliant about Jim Henson's vision is that he says, but not yet.
Yes.
You don't have to do it today.
Yeah.
To be honest, this innocence, this childishness inside you, you are stuck with it. It is going to be there for the rest of your life. You need to not dwell on the positives of your childhood too much, as well as the goblin-like negatives. But you're going to need that innocence as armour to get you through what you've got coming. And the, you know, I mean, it's super cheesy because it's the Muppets, right? It's awesome. But, like, the innocence takes form in your friends.
Yeah.
You know, the connections that you make, and the people who love you, and the things that you do which are good. You know, I love the lesson of Ludo where he, how can you control these rocks? How can you talk to rocks? And he says, because they're friends.
Oh, I know, it's so touching.
It is, and Ludo, obviously his name implies his playful nature, and as we see about him, he's just gentle and does no harm, and it's like, how do you make friends with the rocks? It's just like, just do no harm, and actually they'll come and help you out.
Yeah.
It's like all of these adult travails that Sarah knows she's got ahead of her, which she's going to have to deal with the same way that we all do. Actually, if you've kept this ludic spirit with you, then you'll find that the world will come to your rescue. You know, if you create a good bed for yourself, then it's going to cushion your fall when you do happen to trip up.
I love that. I mean, I honestly think the ending is, like, extremely beautiful, where she gets to the end and she's back in her home and she sees her friends, the little dog and Ludo and Hoggle, in the mirror, and they're all like, you know, we came to say goodbye, but, you know, if you need us.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's so lovely.
We're always here. And
we're always here. And she dives straight back into that space and has a party with them.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's so joyful. You know, it does not insist that you just have to grow up.
Yeah.
You know, there's more to it.
And yeah, those friends are going to be there.
Yeah.
Like, they're your friends.
Yeah, it's like you're going to grow up.
Yeah.
That's going to happen.
But don't pretend that, like, the light and the freedom and the just the you and me joy of this thing that you've got with these guys right now, that'll be there too.
Yeah.
And actually, you need it. Like, you really need it. You really need to go back to that well and draw upon it to refresh yourself for all of these problems that are going to come up to you in your life.
And it's so funny because I feel like the energy of that party at the end, the absolute joy of it, it still feels like the Goblins to me. It feels like she's partying with goblins at the end.
It's absolutely where the synthesis happens, isn't
yes,
it?
It's where the synthesis happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all basically goblins.
Yeah, well, after all. Oh my god, we've got the Shadow Trapper's going to be really full after this one.
It's going to be absolutely rammed.
And then, of course, at the end, we also see Jareth in his owl form again, and you kind of go, we might even talk about owls on a separate Shadow Trapper.
Maybe we should.
Yeah, they're so suggestive.
Yeah.
And you're just like, Jareth's better off as an owl. Like, when you see him like that, you're like, there's no kind of like ambiguity to his beauty and purpose.
Yes.
And it's just like, oh yeah, you are kind of perfect actually. Go and fly off somewhere and look great.
And you know, maybe he did become something else, because aren't owls embodiments of wisdom? So maybe he also learned something from Sarah. Maybe the tutorial monster learned something himself.
I am blown away by how awesome that is. So basically, yeah, you know, you load the Shadow Trap with, you close the Shadow Trap rather with friends and family. You know, make sure that you don't get your toys stuck in the hinges when you're trying to close the gate.
Yeah.
But, you know, use them to help you jam it shut when you need to.
Yeah. Wonderful. Sorry?
How long have we been going?
Oh, we've been going a good hour and 10 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. God,
yeah.
I felt much more brisk than that. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, do I do the outro? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Cage closed. That's the Shadow Trap Part 3, Labyrinth, and Goblins.
So fun to talk about Goblins.
Yeah, we really enjoyed today. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you want to reach out to us, then do so via @Diane Podcast and the other Diane channels. We're thinking about branding out, maybe, but you know.
Yeah, at some point.
We'll have some assets that we can kind of roll out, whatever, but, you know, all in good time. We're going to be a bit goblin-like about it. We're not going to charge off on it with any great kind of intent.
We're just sitting around piggybacking on an existing channel for now.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind. Thanks for letting us squat here. Stay tuned, or, you know, come back next time, please, for The Shadow Trap episode 4, where we are going to be looking at none other than Mr. Claus himself, Father Christmas. And the text that we are going to be studying is Coca-Cola's 1997 advert campaign.
Very exciting. Check it out on YouTube, guys. The holidays are coming.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.